Hello students, let us begin today's session by having a look at the entire course, how it is designed for the biology in the class 10th. As you can see on the screen, the science syllabus in class 10th is split into 5 different units. Of these, the biology chapters are presented in the unit 2, that is world of living, and partly in the last unit, that is natural resources. We'll see in the next screen. Now the second unit is having a weightage of 23 marks, whereas the last unit having a weightage of 7 marks. Of these 7 marks, around 4 to 5 marks will be from the biology unit. Now, as you can see here, the unit 2, that is world of living, consists of 4 different chapters. The first one is the life processes that we are going to start today. Now, in this particular chapter, we will talk about what is living, what is the basic concept of metabolism, the basic concept of nutrition, respiration, transportation, and excretion, both in the plants and animals. In general, if I say this is regarding the chapter on plant and animal physiology. The second unit is control and coordination in animals and plants. Now in this we will be talking about the different type of movements, that is tropic movements, nastic movements in the plants, then a brief introduction into the plant hormones, or also known as the PGRs, plant growth regulators, control and coordination in animals, in which we will talk about the neural control and coordination, that is the nervous system, that is neurons, structure and functioning, the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. We'll also talk about the voluntary, involuntary and reflex action, along with the functioning of the brain. Now we will finish this chapter with a concept on chemical coordination in the animals and plants both, and in animals we will talk about the animal hormones. The next chapter is on reproduction. Now here the reproduction we are going to learn both in case of the plants as well as animals. In case of the plants and animals, we will learn both the sexual as well as asexual mode of reproduction. Also, we will talk about a concept called variations and why it is important for the process of evolution. Now, along with this, we will also learn about reproductive health and the need of family planning and how to prevent STDs, that is sexually transmitted disease, for example the HIV/AIDS. We'll also talk about a concept on the child bearing and women's health. The last chapter of this particular unit is on heredity and evolution. So this is a chapter where we will learn about genetics, classical genetics. Here we will talk about what does the term heredity means. We will talk about the father of genetics and his work, that is Mendel's and his work, his contribution towards the understanding of genetics. We will also talk about monohybrid, dihybrid cross and the different laws of inheritance as proposed by Mendel, that is the laws of inheritance of traits. We will also talk about the sex determination in case of the humans and a brief introduction to the process of evolution. We will also talk brief about how the human evolution has occurred in the nature. Now when we go to the last unit, we are having two chapters. One is our environment and the second one is the management of natural resources. In the our environment chapter, we will talk about ecosystem, certain environmental problems, what is ozone, why we need to maintain the ozone layer, how they are protecting us, what is ozone depletion, what are the causes for it, how can we prevent it, also a concept on waste production and their solutions, and an understanding of the biodegradable and non-biodegradable substances. In the last chapter, management of natural resources, we will talk about the conservation and judicious use of natural resources. We have to understand first what are natural resources, why are they important, and then we have to understand why we need to conserve them and how can we conserve them. Now in this we will talk about forest and wildlife, coal and petroleum conservations, examples where people have participated for the conservation of nature and natural resources. We'll also have a discussion on the big dams, their advantages and limitation or disadvantages, what are the alternatives to it if any, and what is water harvesting, that is watershed management, why are they important, and a brief note on the sustainability of natural resources. So this particular screen represents the entire syllabus, and we have to go through each of these concepts through when we start the syllabus. Here you can see the list of practicals. There are 4 practicals that have been mentioned in your syllabus. All of these are related to the unit number 2. So as and when we are finishing the concept, theory concept, we have to perform the practical. So the practicals are as follows. The first one is a preparation of a temporary amount of leaf peel to show the stomata. So we will be taking certain leaf and we will be making a slide so that we can see the stomata under the microscope. We will be preparing it. We are not going to use a permanent slide, so we will be preparing it. All of you will be doing it. The second one is an experiment to show the CO2 is given out during respiration. Third one is the studying, studying of binary fission in amoeba and budding in yeast and hydra with the help of prepared slides. So permanent slides are there with us. So you're going to use that to study these 2 particular, binary fission and budding in yeast and hydra. The last experiment is identification of different parts of an embryo of a dicot seed. We can take any one of these seeds and we will be germinating it, and we will identify the different parts of the embryo of the seeds, germinated seed. So these are the practicals. These are only 4 practicals. Again, there are certain activities which are there, which are in the textbook. We will be completing that also as a part of the, as the theory gets over, as a part of the practical. In this slide, you can see the assessment areas for the class 10th science. I would focus your attention to the 20 marks internal assessment. Now there are 3 areas as per the latest syllabus plan, 3 areas in which you are going to be assessed. One of that is the periodic assessment, and in this again there are 2 sections in which you are going to be getting marks. Each of that is going to be of 5 marks. There is the second subject enrichment or the practical work of 5 marks. Your record, your record and the other practical activities, based on that you will be awarded 5 marks. And there is something called portfolio, that is of the 5 marks. So what are these? Let us see in detail in the next slide. Of the first periodic assessment, total 10 marks, 5 marks will be awarded based on the periodic test conducted by the school. Now you'll be getting the average or the best 2 examinations, best 2 tests that the school conducts, and it will be converted into 5 marks for the subject. Now the next 5 mark is based on short test, oral test, quiz, concept maps, projects, poster, presentation, and certain other activities that your teachers will conduct, and based on that you will be getting the 5 marks of the periodic assessment. Now the practicals, as I said, that work to be done throughout the year, the record that you're going to maintain, based on that you'll be getting the 5 marks of the subject enrichment activity. Now the third one is the portfolio that has to be prepared by the student. So what is this? So this includes the classwork, okay, mainly the classwork, homework and other sample of students' work, and this will carry a weightage of 5 marks for the final results. So this is what, so you have 10 marks, here you have 5 marks, and here you have the remaining 5 marks. So a total of 20 marks. This is your assessment areas for the internal assessment of 20 marks for your science. Now let us begin with the first chapter, that is life processes. This is chapter number 6, one of the very first chapter of biology in class 10. Let us start by first understanding the term life processes. In the simplest form, the word life processes includes all the various processes occurring in the living organism which are essential to maintain life or to call the organism as living. Now, to make you understand the importance of life processes, let me start by giving an analogy of a car. Imagine you are having a car. Now, for the car to run, you have to fill it with a fuel, let it be petrol or diesel. Now, once you fill it with the petrol or diesel, it runs through the engine, it gets burned and produces the energy, and this energy makes the car run. But at the end, the car also produces exhaust in the form of certain harmful gases. Similarly, in living organisms, there are number of processes, biological processes that continues so that the organism is going to be living. Now, for any activity, we know that energy is essential. Here also, to perform all the biological activity, energy is required. Not only when we are actively participating in any physical activities like running, dancing, playing, singing, we require energy, but whenever we are seemingly doing nothing like sleeping, we also require the energy. For the maintenance job, the body requires energy. Now the energy comes from outside the body. Now how do you obtain the energy? We obtain the energy by breaking down, by oxidizing the food that we obtain through the process of nutrition. Now nutrition is the process by which we are going to take the food and we are going to break it down so that by the process of respiration or by the process of cellular respiration, we can oxidize the food and obtain the energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate or ATP. Remember, ATP is the energy currency of the body. Now these oxidizing and reducing reactions are some of the most common chemical means to break down the molecules inside the living organism. And for this process to go on, the organisms require oxygen, and this oxygen typically comes from outside with the process of the respiration. Now, in certain organisms, like in simple unicellular organisms, we don't have any specific organisms that is for exchange of gases or for removal of the water or food materials in the body. Because in these cases, the entire surface of the organism actually is in contact with the surface. That is, simply, for example, by diffusion, they can meet their oxygen requirement. But when you talk about an organism as complex as that of the humans, a simple process like the diffusion cannot suffice the oxygen requirement. Now, the reason for this is in these organisms like us, the requirement of oxygen is much higher than a simple organism like amoeba, and also in our cases, our entire body is not in contact with the outside or the atmosphere or the surface. So in our cases, for example, in complex organisms, we require a specialized transport system that can carry molecules from one part to the next part. We require systems which can basically move the oxygen that is coming from outside with the help of respiration, so that that particular oxygen can reach each and every cell in the body, and again each of the cell will meet their oxygen requirement and thereby the energy requirement by oxidizing the glucose molecule. Now, once we have all of these processes, metabolic process or cellular process going on, nutrition, respiration, growth, transportation, there are also byproducts that are formed. In our cases, for example, we have the excretion in the form of the waste are generated in the form of nitrogenous waste, CO2, and these waste or these unnecessary substances need to be moved out of the body. Now if they gets deposited or gets accumulated in the body, then they will create a lot of problem, lot of complexities. So that's why they need to be removed. Again, there has to be a specialized organ system, specialized structure in case of complex organisms like humans for the process of excretion to go on, as compared to the unicellular organism where you have a simple process, a single cell, so that they can meet their excretion process by simply diffusion, but not the higher organisms. For us, we have a specialized, well developed excretion system that is going to be part of the entire system. So nutrition is the process by which the organism is going to obtain its food. Now food is essential for the requirement of the energy, to produce energy, and the energy is required to perform the life processes, to perform the maintenance job that is essential for the organism to survive, for the organism to live. So nutrition is the process of providing or obtaining food necessary for the health and the growth of the organism. Now we can divide organisms into three categories based on how they obtain the food. Now the first category is going to be the autotrophic organism or the autotrophs. Now the organism that can prepare its own food using simple substances present around it, they are called the autotrophic organism. For example, all the green plants that possess the chlorophyll can produce its own food by the process of photosynthesis. Not only that, there are another group of organisms and they are called the chemoautotrophs. Now the first group, as I said, the organisms that prepare their food by using the energy from the sunlight, they are called photoautotrophs, and they are the photosynthesizing organisms, for example, that is the plants. Now the second group is called chemoautotrophs, and these are the organisms that obtain the energy by oxidizing inorganic chemicals present inside the body. Now one of the example is the sulfur bacteria. So these are the autotrophic organism that can prepare its own food. They don't depend on others for the nutrient requirement. Now the second group is the heterotrophic organisms. Now these are the organisms that depend on others for their food requirements, and typically they are called consumers, and typically they depend on the producers for their food. But again, there are saprophytes. Now the saprophytes, they obtain the food from dead and decaying organic matter. Okay, so the rotten organic matter is the source of food or nutrition for this group of organisms, and fungi is a very good example of the same. Now the next group is the parasites. Now the parasites, these organisms, they live on the host organism and they do not kill them, but they keep on deriving nutrients out of it. Now there are two categories, as you can see on the screen. One is called endoparasites and the second one is called ectoparasites. Now the endoparasites are the organisms or are the parasites that live inside the body, inside the host body, for the nutritional requirements. Examples, you can see liver fluke and tapeworm. Now the ectoparasites on the other hand, they live on the surface of the host organism. Tick, lice, these are the examples. Now the third category of the heterotrophic mode of organisms, heterotrophic mode of nutrition, is the holozoic. Now in this case, what happens is the organism take in the solid food and they digest it inside the body with the help of biocatalyst or the enzymes. Now one of the very common example of that is ourselves. So what we do, we take the solid food, complete whole food inside our body, and then with the help of different enzymes, there are a number of enzymes, we digest it, break it down, and then derive energy out of it. So humans is a very good example of the holozoic mode of nutrition. The final one is the mixotrophs. Now the mixotrophs are the organisms that exhibit both autotrophic as well as heterotrophic mode of nutrition. Right. One of the example is euglena. Euglena is unique in the sense that when the sunlight is available, when the light is available, they go for the autotrophic mode of nutrition. But when they are in the dark, they remove the chlorophyll pigments, they undergo the heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So euglena exhibits both autotrophic as well as heterotrophic mode of nutrition, and that's why these mode of nutritions, where you have both of these methods, this is called the mixotrophs or mixotrophic mode of nutrition. So these are the different types of nutritions that we can see in the nature. Now let us discuss the photoautotrophs and how do they obtain energy, how do they obtain the nutrition. Now as you can see in the picture here, the photoautotrophs obtain their food requirements, nutrient requirements, with the help of the process called photosynthesis. Now what happens here? The electromagnetic waves of the light energy from the sun is somehow converted into the chemical energy. That is, the photosynthetic organisms take in the outside materials. What are these outside materials? This is the carbon dioxide and water. So they will use the carbon dioxide and water, and they will convert it into a biomolecule. So what is the biomolecule? The biomolecule is the carbohydrate. Remember. So what are we doing? We are taking in, the plant is taking in the carbon dioxide and water and converting it into carbohydrates or the sugars, as you have seen earlier. Now this process of conversion is going to be with the help of the very important chlorophyll pigments and with the help of energy from the sunlight. So with the help of sunlight, in the presence of chlorophyll pigments, we are converting the carbon dioxide and water into carbohydrates in a two-step process. Okay, in a two-step process, and that is called photosynthesis. As you can see in this picture, the plant is going to take in water from the soil, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and then use the sun and light energy and convert the CO2 and water into sugars, and in the process it is going to release the oxygen. Oxygen is important for us, for the living animals, organisms, and the oxygen is a byproduct of the process of photosynthesis. Now the carbohydrates formed are used by the plants to meet their energy requirements, and the carbohydrates are oxidized later on during the process of cellular respiration, and ATP is formed out of this. Energy is required by the plant, so the plant is going to obtain the energy from these carbohydrates by the process of cellular respiration, right, in the form of adenosine triphosphates. Now whenever you have excess amount of these carbohydrates, they are again stored in the form of starch in the plants. Now remember, the starch is the storage form of carbohydrates in the plants, whereas there is another structure, another compound called the glycogen. Glycogen is a storage form of carbohydrates or sugars in case of the animal or animals. According to the textbook, there are three phases in which they have written the photosynthesis occurs. Let us understand that. The first one is going to be the absorption of light energy by chlorophyll. In the first step, what happens? The chlorophyll absorbs certain specific wavelengths of light from the sun, and in the second step, this light energy that has been received, it is getting converted into chemical energy, right? Light energy is getting converted into chemical energy, and at the same time what happens, there is going to be photohydrolysis, that is splitting of water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen in the presence of light. That is called photohydrolysis. And in the next stage, that is step 3, that particular carbon dioxide is going to be reduced into carbohydrates or sugars. So as you can see, there is a balanced equation of the process of photosynthesis. 6 molecules of CO2 combines with 12 molecules of water molecule in the presence of chlorophyll and sunlight, gets converted into the glucose molecule, right? They can get converted into glucose molecule C6H12O6, and along with that they produce the 6O2 as a byproduct, and this is released into the atmosphere, and then along with this you also get 6 molecule of water. So this is your balanced chemical equation for the process of photosynthesis. Now, to understand the process slightly in a better way, we have to understand what actually is going on inside the leaf. So here is a diagram of the leaf anatomy from your textbook. Now here what you see, when we take a cross section of the leaf, now we see the upper epidermis, the lower epidermis, and in between that we are having, these are called the mesophils. Okay, these are simple parenchyma and they contain the chloroplast, and that's why they are called the mesophils. As you can see here, chloroplast is mentioned. In these parenchyma you have the chloroplast, that's why the name mesophil. And you are also having the air space and the guard cells. To make you understand the same concept a little bit better, I have taken a different image. Let us see that. Now here you can see a cross section of the leaf, and you can see the outermost, the structure is going to be the cuticle outside the upper epidermis, and here you are having the lower epidermis, and here also you are going to have a layer called cuticle. Now typically the cuticle is chemical structure that prevent the loss of water. They are just kind of for protection and the prevention of loss of water. Now as I said, you are going to have here the mesophils, spongy mesophils, and the palisade mesophils, or the palisade parenchyma and spongy parenchyma. Now mesophils, remember, these are basically the parenchyma containing chloroplasts. Parenchyma tissue containing chloroplasts, these are called the mesophils. Now if you take a single cell here and you start looking into it, you can see a single chloroplast. And when you see a single chloroplast under microscope, it looks something like what you see now. You can see here the chloroplast is going to be a double membrane structure. There is an outer membrane, there is an inner membrane, and inside that you are having these small coin-like structures that are stacked over each other. Now these individual coin-like structures, these are called thylakoids. Okay, these are called the thylakoids, and this stack of thylakoid, stack of this coin-like structure, this is called the granum or the grana. Remember, so individual structure is called thylakoid and the stack is called granum. Now number of these granum, they are connected by structure called the stroma lamella. These structures are called stroma lamella, and the aqueous fluid inside is called the stroma. Okay, these are called the stroma. Now question is, we all know that the chloroplast is going to be the green plastid and it contains the chlorophyll pigment. Question is, where do they contain the green pigments? Remember, the green pigments are present inside the thylakoid. In between the thylakoid, you are going to have the chlorophyll pigments. Now when you see the chloroplast under a microscope, right, we are going to see something like this. This is a cell, and inside the cell you can see the chloroplast. And when you take a single chloroplast and you zoom in, you see the thylakoid membranes, chlorophyll containing thylakoid membranes. So your chlorophylls are present in the membranes of the thylakoid. Now this particular diagram, this particular image is going to be visible when we see the chloroplast under an electron microscope. Now going back, just to give you a little bit of detail, as I said in the beginning, the photosynthesis is going to occur in two stages, and the two stages, to be precise, are called the light reaction and the dark reaction. In the light reaction or the phase 1 of photosynthesis, it is a light dependent reaction. That means light is essential for the phase 1 to occur. Without sunlight, this process will not continue. Now what happens here? Now as we spoke till now, the chlorophyll pigments are present. Here the sunlight is going to fall on these chlorophyll pigments and the chlorophyll pigments get excited, and these excited chlorophyll pigments, they release the electron. That is, as it is written here very clearly, the photosynthetic electron transfer reactions in the thylakoid membranes. And this electron transport help in creation of two intermediate products, two molecules. These are called the ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and NADPH. Now the full form is not required right now, but if we want to know, it is called nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate, NADP. And when we say NADPH, it is the reduced form of NADP, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. So we get these two intermediate products, that is ATP and NADPH, when we are moving from stage 1 to stage 2. Now these high energy compounds ATP and NADPH are the end product of stage 1, but are the starting product and essential for the stage 2 or dark reaction. Remember, the dark reaction is light independent reaction. We do not require sunlight for this. So what happens in here? As you have seen earlier, and it is written here, the carbon dioxide is getting fixed here. It is getting reduced. Reduced into what? Reduced into the sugar. Okay, remember, by using this high energy intermediate molecules or compounds ATP and NADPH, we are going to reduce the CO2 into the sugar or C6H12O6. Right, so this is the process of the photosynthesis that occur in two stages. You will learn in detail about this in the class 11th. Now, we spoke in the process of photosynthesis, we require a large amount of CO2 that is to be reduced to give us the carbohydrate or the glucose. Question is, how does the plant get all of the required CO2? Now we all know that there are structures throughout the plant body that take care of the oxygen requirement of each of the body parts of the plant. But in case of the leaves, we have a specialized structure, and that is called the stomata. Now as you can see here, stomata is essential for the exchange of gases between the plant and the environment. Now here you can see the structure. You have a pair of guard cells in the center. This is your guard cells, and around that you are having subsidiary cells, around which you are going to have the epidermal cells. Now these guard cells together, they form the space or this pore. It is called stomatal pore or stomatal aperture, or simply stomata. Now when it is in an open condition, the exchange of gases is possible, but when it is in closed condition, the exchange of gases is simply not possible. Now question is, why do you think the plant need to close the stomata? Now there is a process called transpiration. Now transpiration refers to the process of loss of water from the aerial surface of the plant, that is from the surface of the leaves, to the atmosphere in the form of water vapors. So when the stomata remains open for a long time, there is a very good chance that it might lose a large amount of water from its stuff, from the leaves, which may not be required, which may not be ideal, and at those times it needs to close the stomata. So question is, how do the plant regulate the opening and closing of stomata? Let's have a look at that. Now this particular slide explains the opening and closing of stomata. Now for the opening of the stomata, typically during the daytime, what happens when the stomata needs to open, there will be accumulation of the K plus ions by the guard cells. As you saw in the previous slide, the guard cells will start accumulating K plus ions. When the K plus ions are going to be accumulated, there will be change in the concentration of water and the ions, and that basically would lead to the endosmosis of water from the subsidiary cells, which are outside the guard cells, and the guard cells as a result becomes turgid, that leads to the opening of the stomata. Now during the night, when the stomata needs to close, the process is simply reverse of this, that is, the stomata close when the guard cells lose the ions, K plus ions. This will basically lead to the exosmosis of water, and the guard cells becomes flaccid, and finally it leads to the stomata to close. That's the process of opening and closing of the stomata with the help of the the accumulation of the K plus ions in the guard cells, or the loss of K plus ion in the guard cells, depending on the situations. Okay students, so I'll just take your questions now. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat box. The question that is from Sridevi, I guess there's somebody from the account. What is the meaning of flaccid? Okay, remember the term turgid and flaccids are opposite to each other. That means turgidity means the cell becomes swollen, and flaccid is opposite of that. The cell loses the water and it will become basically loose. Okay, that is called the flaccid condition. From where does the plant get K plus ions, sir? Okay, so the K plus ions and other ions, Na plus, K plus, there are a number of these ions, and these ions are present in the cell, in the plant cells by default. So when the plant take up water, the water along with ions are actually taken up. It is not only water, it is always, if you remember, it is always said as water and minerals are taken up. So the water is taken up along with the minerals along with the ions. So ions are present. From the subsidiary cells, the ions are transported into the guard cells, and then the guard cells become have a chance to take the water from the nearby cells to become turgid. Na plus, sodium, potassium, Na plus, K plus, that's the ion. Yes, potassium ion, yes. Ankita, during night cells intake oxygen and release CO2. Does it have any enzyme to continue in this process? During night cells taken, I didn't understand the question properly, but again I'll try to answer this, Ankita. So during the daytime, the process is simple. The plant will take CO2 from the atmosphere and release the O2. That is for the process of photosynthesis. But for the process of respiration, it still requires the O2 and release the CO2. Now the same process happens in the evening, in the night. So that is the regular process of respiration that happens in the day or night, where the O2 is taken in and the CO2 is released. Now in some other cases, for example in desert plant, the stomata typically remains open during the night, it closes during the day. It is opposite to the regular plants. So in these plants, the CO2 that is taken up during the during the night time, as the stomata remains open in the night, the gaseous exchange happens in the night. So the plant will take up the CO2 in the night, convert it into an organic acid, Okay, it's an organic acid. Now this organic acid is going to be kept in the cell. Next day morning, when the sunlight is available, this organic acid, during the daytime the stomata will remain closed, so the CO2 cannot come from outside. So what happens is, the cell which has stored the organic acid will now give away the CO2 within itself. The cell itself will give rise to the CO2, so that even when the stomata is closed in the day, the plant can continue the process of carbon dioxide reduction, as it has already converted the CO2 into the organic acid in the previous day night when the stomata was open. I hope it is clear, Ankita. Ankita, sir, then how the carbon dioxide is released from the plant? During the daytime the CO2 are released during the night time the CO2 are released, as there is no photosynthesis taking place, so there is no need of CO2 in the plant. Daytime CO2 is required, but night CO2 is not required. I hope it is clear, Ankita. Now, what is biocatalyst enzymes? Okay, listen. So whenever you are having a chemical reaction, what happens is A plus B give rise to a product, let's say C. Now, if the process is going to take place within a time span of, let's say, 1 hour, if we use a catalyst, that 1 hour might get reduced to 1 second. I'm just giving an a rough example, do not quote anywhere. So if the 1 hour time we are reducing it to 1 second, but we are getting the product. Now once the process is over, A plus B giving rise to C, in 1 second if it is over, then this particular enzyme that we are talking about, or this particular biocatalyst we are talking about, it is free. So again it is going to take part in another A plus B reaction giving rise to C. So it basically speeds up the biochemical reactions. The biocatalyst or the catalyst, they always speed up the reaction. They will go speed up the reaction, they are out of the process. They do not make any portion of the product. So they are always free after the reaction is over. I hope that is clear, biocatalyst enzymes. And again, most of the proteins are, actually almost all the enzymes are protein except ribozyme, which is basically a RNA based enzyme. Sir, may I know that after the photosynthesis process, do plants release any energy in the atmosphere? I don't clearly understand your question. They will not release any energy into the atmosphere. Why would they release energy into the atmosphere? After photosynthesis, the plant will basically use whatever carbohydrates are required. How will they use? They will basically use that carbohydrate or the glucose in the process of cellular respiration. They will break it down. Okay, they will break it down. They will oxidize it, just like burning. And by that process, you get adenosine triphosphate. That is the energy currency of the cell. That ATP is going to be used for the required energy. Whatever it is required, they are going to use that. But I don't think they will release any form of energy into the atmosphere. There is no need, because the plant requires energy for itself. I hope it is clear, Mr. Gouda. I guess Ankita, yes. What happens to the plant? What happens to the plant? Get oxygen in the night. I didn't understand the question. Others, Ladi, others, I didn't understand the question. Okay, what will happen if the granum is not in the form of steak? What is its role? This is just a structural organization. Okay, thylakoid is the main structure, and thylakoid is just arranged on top of each other in the form of a granum. So there is no chance that why it will not be arranged in the granum, because in nature in every cell, like this mesophils, you have the plastic, you have the chloroplast, and the chloroplast you have the thylakoid packed over each other in the form of granum. If it is not also, for example, if you just imagine that if the granum is not organized in the regular way also, it should be alright, because the chlorophyll gets excited, not the granum, not the thylakoid. If the chlorophyll is accessible to the sunlight, things will be alright, no problem at all. What criteria do we use to decide whether something is alive? Okay, now there are lots of criteria. One of them is they should be able to perform biochemical reaction, the metabolism should be going on, right? And also they should have the conscious. These are the two different things, major things that we can use. Should be living basically if they are having biochemical reactions going on, or that is metabolism going on in between in them, so that can be considered as alive. And in class 11th again there is a in the beginning chapter there's an entire concepts on why we should call something as living, why we should not call something as living. Which are tiny pores within the surface of the leaves? Okay, tiny pores within the surface of the leaves are the stomata. Okay, you have learned in class 9th also, I hope. Stomatas are the small pores within the leaves. Two guard cells which are bean shaped, they form the pore, and that pore is called stomatal aperture. Now the guard cells along with the stomatal aperture together they are called stomatal apparatus. What is glycogen? Glycogen is basically the storage form of excess amount of glucose or carbohydrates in animals. Okay, it gets stored in the liver. When you have excess of glucose, it gets stored in the form of glycogen in the liver. It is just counterpart of the starch in animal. We have starch in plants, we have glycogen in animal. Okay. Any other doubts? Please ask. Any other? Courses, I don't understand this particular one. Ananta Tripathi, I think in that account somebody is asking what is the meaning of courses. I don't understand the word courses. Okay, well, just what did you get it? Okay, I don't know. In what context are you asking that question? In what context are you asking? I don't understand, sorry. Anyway, let's move to the WhatsApp. Anyway, we have the account there also. So I hope we can close the session now, and I hope it has been productive to you all. And today with this short period of time I had to prepare because we got the timetable yesterday, and all of these things happened in a quick manner, so I didn't have much of time to prepare for the classes. The PPT has to be prepared and the voiceover, but it's a little bit difficult, but again I hope the next classes onwards should be better. I hope we have a class tomorrow. We should be able to clear the concepts tomorrow onwards. Okay, I think let's move to the WhatsApp, and let's clear the doubts there. Okay, Satyanarayana and Anuradha Lingam, these two students can ask the doubts in the WhatsApp. Let's move to the WhatsApp. Thank you all for coming. I'm closing the session now.